Hello everyone, and we are back! It's been a while since I uploaded a video on YouTube, but now I have something very special for you. You see, I have an interview with none other than Noor Bin Ladin. Yes, she has done a lot of great work fighting for freedom, and some of you might not know who she is, so I'll just let her tell you when we get to the interview. As some of you might know, I have started a Substack, which is an excellent platform. I'll leave the links to it in the description below, and also Noor Bin Ladin's links, so you can follow her. But make sure to go over to my Substack, where you will find my new podcast, the FreedomCast, where I will be doing a lot of interesting interviews with different people. So make sure to go and follow me on my Substack. Very important that you do. So you don't miss any of my upcoming interviews and podcasts. Anyway, let's get right into the interview, guys. So welcome everyone to this first episode of the FreedomCast podcast with me, Peter Sweden. And we have our very first special guest here today, Noor Bin Ladin.
Hi, Peter. Great to be with you today.
Thank you so much for coming on. It's great that you're here. I've been following your stuff for quite some time, but probably there are a lot of people out there that probably haven't heard about you and are a bit curious about who you are. So why not just introduce yourself, and then let's get going on this podcast.
Sure thing. Yeah. So for those who are hearing about me for the first time, my name is Noor Bin Ladin. I am Swiss from my mom's side, Saudi from my father's side, as the name indicates. And offline, you asked me maybe to address this issue, which I will do briefly. For those who would like more information, of course, you can go to my website, noorbinladin.com, and I've done several interviews where I properly introduced myself and explained the connection. But yes, so my father is from the Bin Laden family, and I was born and grew up carrying this name. I was 14 years old when the tragedy of 9/11 happened, and it's had an impact on all of our lives, of course, and on my own as well. And it's informed a lot of my views in many ways, or in any case, it's shaped my life. And when I decided to go public and to lend my voice to the many other voices out there fighting for our freedom, I felt a sense of duty of using this name, which I knew would have a certain impact and would draw people in, even out of sheer curiosity for some. But yes, I wanted to participate in this movement of spreading the truth, seeing the very critical point in history where we find ourselves today. And so this is what I've dedicated myself the last 2.5 years publicly. I've been doing research for over 5 years now on, how would you say, the history of globalism. I would say my focus is on the history of globalism and on the history of the United States and how those two intersect. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell.
No, excellent. And I'll of course make sure to link to your website so people can find you as well, and all of your social media as well. So you would say that has all of this stuff that has happened has kind of informed you to become the freedom fighter that you have been. It's influenced you a lot in this direction, because of course you talk a lot about the globalism, about freedom, about the World Economic Forum, and so on. You would say that has helped you form you in that direction.
Yes, but I think, putting aside my particular set of circumstances, I think 9/11 was a turning point for a lot of people.
Yes.
And the aftermath specifically of 9/11 and the Patriot Act and the ensuing measures that were implemented, to fight the war on terror, and I use quotes here, as a justification has, I mean, there is a pre 9/11 world and a post
Exactly.
9/11 world.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us that are in this fight, let's put it that way, for our freedoms, see that specific event. I mean, there have been others, of course, but that one was just so traumatic and so shocking, that it was a clear point in time, of course, on the timeline
Yeah.
of.
Yeah, I think the all of this Patriot Act and everything that happened after 9/11 was definitely used to take away people's freedom in many ways, just like they did in the last few years with the lockdowns and the COVID passports and all of that stuff. We have seen it kind of links together all of the similar agenda to take away people's freedoms and to promote globalism and, just get more control over people's lives, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And, coming back to this notion of the history of globalism, you look at the past 100+ years, and you see these key events that took place. And you're right to mention, absolutely, COVID, because a lot of people think of the Great Reset and where we are today as the beginning of something, where in fact it is very much the end of something, or the final stages of a plan that has been incredibly long-standing to get us to the point where we are today, which is really on the brink of having all of our freedoms completely decimated.
Yes, and on that topic, you went to Davos this year to report on the World Economic Forum meeting that was taking place. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, it's I mean, funny, but being Swiss, I was born and raised in Switzerland. I've lived almost all of my life here, and it feels strange, being in the belly of the beast, because Switzerland has a very key role in the globalist agenda's rollout. And you could say that Switzerland has been selected as the headquarters, or the administrative headquarters at least, for many of the vehicles that are part of the globalist infrastructure. And so what we can talk about as well is this notion of the architecture of the globalists, and how throughout the 20th century they've created these vehicles, namely, international organizations. And aside from that, they've deployed different operations to capture governments. We can talk about all of this during the call, but coming back to Switzerland. So Switzerland was chosen as the place where all of these international organizations would be headquartered. And so while the United Nations has a dual headquarter system between New York and Geneva, all of the sort of daughter organizations of the UN, especially the WHO, which we'll also talk about during this call, are in Switzerland. And the World Economic Forum also is headquartered in Switzerland. More specifically, Geneva is the key hub here. And once a year, they have this annual meeting in Davos. And so I decided to go for the first time to report from there earlier in January. Yeah.
Yeah, and I saw you did a lot of excellent reporting there that people should definitely go and check out. And was there anything especially that caught your eye there? Did you get to meet Klaus Schwab?
No, I didn't.
No?
But I'll give a shout out to my friend Masako, who ambushed him, and it was so epic. I don't know if you saw that.
I did see that video, yes.
Yeah, that was amazing. She did such an amazing job. She waited over 3 hours in the cold to catch him there. So no, total kudos to Masako for that. But no, I didn't meet or talk with anyone who was attending. I was just really there to report on the agenda and what was being discussed.
Yes.
In the halls of that building there in Davos. And a lot was being discussed, but this is something that your audience will be so familiar with because you're such an amazing reporter when it comes to the especially the climate stuff, and how
Oh, thank
climate
you.
change, quote, climate change is being used as a Trojan horse in order to justify the implementation of their draconian restrictions on the population. We have two main Trojan horses, I would say, obviously, quote, again, quote, pandemics. I'm saying quotes because, for the audio version, but quotes, pandemics, and quote, climate change. So you could see how these were the overarching, I don't know how you pronounce that word,
Yeah.
themes underpinned by the digitization in order to roll out digital IDs and social credit scores,
Mm.
and essentially our digital jails.
Yes, and as you say, I think the whole agenda that we saw with the lockdowns and the COVID passports and all of that, I definitely think that will be used going forward with the climate agenda. That it was kind of a dry test run, if you will, to implement the systems so that they are in place, so that they then can use it, and then they can just use, it all comes down to control, that they want to control people, they want to control what you can do, what you can say, they want total control, and they just use different means, as you said, as we talked about in the beginning. They had the Patriot Act, they used that as a way to take away people's rights. Then they had then COVID came along, and they used that as a reason to take away people's rights with lockdowns and all of that stuff. And I'm going forward, we are going to see more and more that they will be using the climate agenda to continue eroding people's rights. We're already seeing, for example, in many countries, Italy and other countries in Europe, they've had not a climate lockdown yet, but they've been limiting people's indoor temperatures. And we're also seeing in Britain now, they're getting these 15-minute cities where they are locking people inside small areas of their towns. And it all comes back to this globalist agenda that you've been talking about, in my opinion at least. And
No, absolutely. And, the weaponization of certain events and certain issues, whether manufactured or not, has been going on for a long time. And right now, the focus is on so-called pandemics and so-called climate change, and they go hand in hand. And there were so many different panels going on that week, but one that really stood out was this panel entitled 100 Days to Outtrace the Next Pandemic. And I'm sure you saw the clip. Tony Blair was part of that panel, as well as Albert Bourla from Pfizer. And Tony Blair was talking about the absolute necessity and urgency for a digital health infrastructure. And so that's where the digital IDs come in. And so the digital passports. And so we're going to have a social credit score that will be tied to our digital passports. And then the climate change comes in the sense that they want to absolutely restrict all of our movements. And that's where, you mentioned the 15-minute cities. We have the example of what's going on in Oxford right now.
yeah, many people don't even know that they're actually doing this right now. They're going to lock people have to pay in order, if they're dividing the city up into different zones. And if the people want to cross into the different areas of the city with their car, they have to pay the government for a license, and then they'll get 100 passes a year. You have to literally pay for a movement license.
That's the thing. We will have no more freedom of movement with their new system. And so we're also going to have, with these IDs, we're going to have carbon credit. They're going to track our carbon footprint. And I think the thing that I tried to focus on during that whole week of Davos reporting is this notion of metrology. So metrology is the science of measurement, and they want to measure everything everywhere at all times. And we are in a situation where they are incredibly close to realizing that goal because of the advent of Internet of Things, because of the advent of 5G, the sophistication of the devices, and of course, CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, which are also going to be rolled out imminently. And so I come back again to this term of digital jails, because once everything is digital and tied to an ID, we will have no more freedom. I mean, they've eroded our freedoms to such an extent already. And the so-called COVID pandemic was a stark realization that, you know, people are willing to comply. It was in essence a very big compliance test, and
Yep.
and people don't realize what they're signing up for. They don't realize, you know, that because they've done such an amazing job with the brainwashing. When you look at there are so many people that believe in the danger of climate change, and they've done such a good job with the propaganda that that they're willing to just have that system put in place by their government. They truly believe that the government is looking out for them, and that what they are proposing are solutions. And again, we come back to the same old system: problem, reaction, solution. And it's a tried and tested method that works. And they've done it time and time again. And people need to wake up and realize that they are manufacturing the problem in order to move the agenda forward. And the agenda, in the larger scheme of things, if we had to boil it down to one thing, is world government and the centralization of power. And that goes through the making of the nation completely obsolete. The nation state becomes completely obsolete. Sovereignty of nations needs to be made obsolete, and so does sovereignty of the individual.
Yeah, exactly, because they want to replace the sovereignty of the individual and the sovereignty of the nation state with the complete control of the globalists. Yeah. They want to control it all instead of allowing people the individual freedom. And I mean, you talked about the central bank. You mentioned central bank digital currency. Yeah. Where do you see that going? Because a lot of people will say, oh, we got bitcoins, we got all of the cryptocurrencies that are actually good for freedom. You know, Bitcoin, nobody can control Bitcoin and so on. That's a digital currency. What's the difference between something like Bitcoin and something like central bank digital currency?
You know, I'm not an expert on Bitcoin. It's something that I've looked at with a lot of, what's the word in English? I'm wary of Bitcoin. I hope that it is what, you know, it is purported to be, which is essentially a pass for freedom. But who knows if it's not a psyop or a how would you say, a way to get people accustomed to the notion of digital currencies. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but
I think you're onto something. I think from what I've seen with the bitcoins and the like, they are basically uncensorable, so people can use it as cash. However, it is a digital currency, so it has kind of got people accustomed to it over the years. I think that's the negative part. And coming on to the central bank digital currencies, that will be completely under the control of the governments, it seems like. As you said, we have been having a bit of financial problems in the world recently. High interest rates, inflation, all that stuff. Things have been getting more expensive. Do you see in a few years' time, maybe, you know, they will say, oh, we have all of these financial problems, why not just get a central bank digital currency, and we'll never have any more no more financial problems ever again. It'll just solve everything. Just use this central bank digital currency that we give you, that we can control everything, track everything you do, and everything will be fine. No more financial crisis. Do you think that's could be something we're looking at?
I think you're absolutely spot on. I only fear that it's going to be much more drastic than that, and I think they are preparing a economic collapse of the likes we've never seen or never read about in books. So I don't know when it's going to happen. I've been bracing, for a year for this event. The one thing, and I've been discussing it on different podcasts and things like that. The one thing I can say is, try to prepare as best as you can in terms of the basics, in terms of stocking up on food. I have about a year and a half worth of food supply, and just I don't even really know what is in store in the next few months. I don't know how far ahead it is, but I really suspect something quite disastrous in the works in order to justify the push for digital currencies handled or controlled by the governments. Again, problem, reaction, solution.
Yeah, and it always seems to come down to that. They make a problem and they come up with a solution as well. And most people just go about and think, oh, they got a good solution, great, we'll go with that, and it's all being used to just implement even more control and even more just transferring power from the people to the elite, transferring wealth from the people to the elite, like we saw with the lockdowns. Like the rich, they got even richer, the poor, they got even poorer, and that seems to be where things are heading. What do you think about this whole AI thing that's coming up? Just to mention a little bit of a current topic. Do you think that will be used as well by the World Economic Forum and the likes for nefarious purposes, or do you think that's something that is a good thing for humanity?
No, I think it's absolutely not a good thing. I find it absolutely terrifying. I think these people that run the world truly view themselves as gods, and they want to transcend mortality and want to become immortal, and it's very evil. In fact, I'm not interested in living in a world where robots and humans are fused together. And you mentioned the World Economic Forum. They've been very big proponents of AI, of transhumanism. And that's why I distrust Elon Musk, and I never jumped on board the Elon Musk fan club, because he's very much part of the establishment, and I don't think you can arrive at the position he's in without being part of the establishment. The so-called richest man in the world, where we know all of this is bogus anyway. We don't even know the names of the richest people in the world. This Forbes list is a total front.
The real richest people, they are somewhere else. All of the people you hear about, Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, they are rich, but there are definitely other people as well that you never get to hear about, that are just trying to keep silent in the background, for sure.
Oh, completely. We don't even know their names, probably. They've hidden everything, and they don't want to be known. Those who really sit at the very top of the pyramid.
Well, if I was them, and I was one of the world's richest people trying to implement my agenda, I would try and stay hidden. I wouldn't want people to know who I was.
Of course,
of course not.
No. Of course, and so these people who we see, Bill Gates and everything, they're puppets. They're implementing, and they're employees, sort of, at the end of the day, and they get perks and privileges for the role that they play. Same with the politicians. We think that they're powerful, but they're given little scraps of power and little so-called positions of power, but they're actors. They're paid actors on the world stage, and they're very good minions. They're very good minions, you know, implementing the agenda, working all together. You know, this coming back to the infrastructure and the architecture of the globalists. You know, you have, you know, the corporations, you have the international organizations, you have the NGOs, you have the captured governments, you have academia and the education system, which were completely captured as well. Not to mention, of course, media, press, entertainment, you know, Hollywood being another, you know, one of their many vehicles through which they push the agenda. And people can't, I think people think that this, it's not possible to do something in such a coordinated fashion. They think that human beings are not capable of doing something like that, but we really have to see these people as a cult, you know, and they pass on this or like a cult or like a religion. They pass on their way of thinking and their belief system onto the next generation. This is very much a intergenerational plan, excuse me, that is being, you know, rolled out before our eyes, you know. And one of the quotes that I mentioned several times back in January when I was doing a few interviews around Davos, there is this financial advisor to President Roosevelt who said in 1950, and I'm going to give you the name of this advisor just to make the point about the intergenerational thing. I have it somewhere here. In 1950, this advisor to the President of the United States, during a Senate subcommittee hearing on the revision of the UN Charter, so to place it back in history, we're in 1950, the UN was created in 1945, right after, or, you know, at the end of World War II.
Yeah.
And so this man goes to this subcommittee and he says, "We shall have world government, whether or not we like it. The question is only whether it will be achieved by consent or by conquest." And he further states, "Mr. Chairman, I am here to testify in favor of Senate Resolution 56, which, if concurrently enacted with the House, would make the peaceful transformation of the UN into a world federation the avowed aim of United States policy." And so this man who said this, his name is James Warburg, and his father was Paul Warburg, key architect of the Federal Reserve, which we know was enacted in 1913. So this is to the point where I'm saying, you know, it's an intergenerational plan, and we can go back, you know, even before the 20th century, and, you know, some might say, you know, way before the 20th century, but my focus is mostly the 20th century and the 19th century because I'm so passionate about the history of the United States of America. So from the Revolution, 1776 onwards. And there are many reasons why I love the US, and I've discussed this at length since going public, but in a more, how do you say, universal way, aside from my personal, you know, reasons. But I really do view the United States as what stands in the way of the globalist agenda and of the world government because of the founding fathers' brilliance and foresight in how they worded the US Constitution and, well, first the Declaration of Independence and the US Constitution and the Bill of Rights. These documents are so key for people to understand, well, the fundamental thing, which is that our rights and our freedoms are not derived from any type of government, but from God. And then that's like the really key thing. And then just what those rights and freedoms are and what it means to be a free individual. It's so perfectly laid out by the founding fathers. And so that's why, just to say a few more words on the American question, that is why there has been such an intensive, malicious operation to destroy the country from within and to completely sever the US population from their history, from their understanding of the founding fathers and why the revolution was fought in the first place. And the result is so catastrophic when you look at the educational system and the young adults it produces today, where they don't even know that the revolution was fought in, and the independence of the United States was declared in 1776. It's really painful to watch. So the globalists have done such a thorough job at making the population compliant, whether in the US or in Europe, the West in general, to transform us into these weak, compliant people who will just roll over when something like COVID is launched, I would say.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree with. I think the U.S. Constitution and the founding fathers, they really set up a very, very good system of government. And if only they had, stick to it as they intended, it would have been excellent. And I think that's why, as you said, they've been trying so hard to try and get America, to try and infiltrate America with globalism. Yeah. And I think what we saw with Trump, we saw Donald Trump, trying to fight back a bit against this, and that's why you saw them go so hard after him with the deep state and all of that stuff, trying to just make his agenda, wither out, and not really much happen. They threw everything at him, it seemed like, to try and stop it.
But the amazing thing is that it woke up so many people, because you could see in real time all the different players and actors of this infrastructure, whether the media, like the other politicians, the corporations, how they were all aligned in castigating and going after President Trump, candidate Trump, then President Trump, and all of his supporters. The smear campaign and just the lawfare against him and the people around him. I mean, what this man had to endure. But coming back to the history of the U.S., which you were right to bring it back to President Trump, because it was such an important moment for the world, not just for America. But you had this other president in the 1800s, President Andrew Jackson. He thwarted twice the creation of a national bank. And so we really have to look at the fact that, yes, the founding fathers were able to do something so robust, because it will have taken the globalists over 100 years. If you look at 1776, and then they didn't quit after, even if they so-called granted the US independence, they were still on the ground, and they started the infiltration operation immediately. They regrouped, the British, they regrouped and decided to go about it in another way, in a more subversive way. But so throughout the 1800s, there were already these attempts to take down America, and to the infiltration operation basically started immediately after the independence of the US. And then, so when I say 100+ years, because in 1913 they finally managed to enact and create the Federal Reserve. Yeah. And so that was really a key moment where it was kind of like the last nail in the coffin in 1913. And then what we've seen throughout the 20th century was building upon that and just gaining ground in all the different institutions and and just waging mass psychological warfare on the population.
Yeah, and with the Federal Reserve, you get the central banks, you get all of this money creation out of thin air, basically. That's a rabbit hole to go down into for people that are interested. I'm sure I'll cover that sometime at a later podcast episode.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you had not long after that, when was it, in the 60s, America went off the gold standard, and then then you had the dollar value just straight down.
71, I think.
Yes,
if I'm not
somewhere
mistaken.
around that point, yeah. And I remember.
No, there's so much to say about the US, but I'm sure we can talk more generally about the globalists and their agenda and where we are today, because there's so much happening right now.
Yeah, what do you think? I want to ask, what do you think? Why have people been so compliant, do you think, over the last few years? Because the things that happened during the lockdowns, you had, I don't know exactly how it was in Switzerland, where you are, but I know in other European countries, you had Austria, for example, and other countries, people had to show their COVID passports in order to be allowed to go to restaurants. You had to scan your QR code. I live in Norway at the moment. I never had the requirements for COVID passport here. They did have one, but you never know. They didn't force people to use it in order to go anywhere. They didn't have such strict restrictions. But they did actually have, we talked about digital ID before. I actually remember logging here in Norway, you can log into your government health website, and you use a digital ID to log in. Everyone here has a digital ID. That's already here in Scandinavia. And I remember logging in, and I could see, I could not only could I see all of my vaccination records from when I was a child, I could see all the vaccines I got as a child. And I also had a COVID passport with a QR code, which was then used mainly for traveling to Europe. It wasn't used domestically. It was used for traveling. So I used a digital ID, and I had it. And this was something that they just gave me. I never asked for it. I never gave any consent. I just got it because I had a digital ID. And you have to have a digital ID here, because you cannot buy, if you want to buy anything online with a credit card, you need to sign in with your digital ID. You basically, to do anything online, you have to have it here. And actually this year they're coming up with a new version where you use an app on your phone. So whenever you need to sign with your digital ID, you just take up your phone and scan your face or scan your fingerprint, and that's how you verify your digital ID. And that's already here. And I think this is something that is coming. This is definitely coming to the rest of Europe, I think. What do you think? Is this part of the plan?
Yeah, no, it's completely part of the plan. And I know that, for example, Estonia was really one of the first countries to roll out these digitized IDs and government services, under the umbrella of this program called e-Estonia.
Yeah.
I know they have massive push in Ukraine to make Ukraine a WEF model, essentially, where they will also digitize all the services of the government. I spoke about this quite a lot during the week at Davos, because the Deputy Prime Minister, Mikhail Fedorov, has been pushing this very strongly, even over a year ago, publishing on his Twitter a very sleek PR promo video about the digitization of all government services and beyond in the Ukraine. And we know that Zelensky signed an agreement to, quote, rebuild Ukraine with BlackRock and different actors. And I think they really, really want to make Ukraine kind of this model, similarly to what they tried to do with Estonia. I didn't know it was so advanced in other countries in Scandinavia. For sure, this is what they want to roll out in every single country. And I am so against this. It's not even strong enough, but I'm so averse. I was in a restaurant not so long ago, and the menu, to read the menu, you needed to scan the QR code. And I just looked at the lady and I said, listen, my camera's not working. so I can't, scan the QR code. Anyway, if my camera was working, I wouldn't have scanned the QR code. I hate these QR codes so much, Peter. And that's what I keep saying, I'm a human being. I am not a QR code. And I mean, what does it mean to have like a QR code to identify yourself? I mean, it's just so dystopian. It's frankly terrifying, and this is not a system under which I want to live. But to say something positive, even though there are large swaths of the population that are still, asleep, more and more people are waking up. And I mean, some people are just so lost when you see all the information that is coming out, and you still have people that are going to get boosted. I really don't know what to say for these people. I mean, the only thing we can do is have, some form of compassion, but it's just so absurd to me. But I do have compassion in the wider sense that because I understand the level of psychological warfare that has been waged on the population to get us to this point. I mean, it is understandable. When you look at it in that way, you can understand where we are, how we got here. But I think there are more of us that are against all of this than we realize. And I'm very encouraged and heartened when I see protests happening, and so many of us are aware of what's going on. So that's encouraging.
Yeah, I think more and more people are, especially with as we talked about before, what happened with Trump. People got kind of awakened to the whole fake news complex, the mainstream media, fake news garbage machine that's pumping garbage into the brains of people. More and more people woke up to that, and also with all the things that happened the last few years, I think more and more people have been waking up. But and back to what you said with QR codes, 100% agree. If I go to a restaurant, I want a real proper menu. Give me a real menu. Don't give me that that ugly QR code thing,
and the thing is, I barely go out, and I live quite a reclusive life, and so I just go from time to time. And so the fact that it is becoming more and more prevalent that these restaurants are using QR codes for menu is very alarming.
They even have it at my gym. They have QR codes. Just scan this QR code to see this info or whatever. It's everywhere, and it's. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So now that you mention all of this, it's actually not surprising, because Sweden especially has been leading in terms of the adoption and the acceptance of all these new technologies. I remember this promo video where people were boasting and saying how cool it was to have a microchip under their skin in order to be able to enter buildings and pay for things, and they were selling it as though that was like just the coolest thing ever. And that was already 8 years ago?
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, the first time that came along was several years ago. I can't remember exactly how many years ago that was, but that I know
at least 5-6 years ago.
I know that quite a few people had gotten it by 2021, I think it was, or 2020. Yeah, 2021. Some 6,000 people had gotten this microchip implant in Sweden. So it's more and more people have been getting it.
They have no idea
it's kind of crazy.
What they're doing. They have no idea what they're doing.
Well, I think some of them do, like the people that are developing it, and maybe some of the people testing it out probably like it, think it's a good thing, but most people probably don't have an idea.
Oh yeah, the people that are behind the development and the deployment, they know exactly what they're doing. But those people who are like, oh yeah, it's so cool, it's going to be so practical. But that's the thing. They always use, either safety or, practicality or different things that supposedly are very positive to sell this to the public.
Yeah, they first come up with a problem, and then they come up with a solution, and then they try to make that solution look like a good thing, something that people want, and to make people fall for it. And And use the media as well to push it, because that's something the media in Sweden has been pushing this microchip thing quite a bit as well. I've been seeing a lot of it in the media, unfortunately. And it's quite interesting that in Sweden the media is probably worse than in many other places. The largest, well, yeah, I would say that probably the largest is the Swedish state-owned news channel. They have the largest TV channel. They have a large and the thing is, in Sweden most people trust them a lot. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it's somewhere around 70 to 80% say that they have a high trust in the Swedish state media, that people have to pay taxes in order to support. Like, it's insane. People are paying taxes to get fed with propaganda. So in Sweden it's quite bad.
I think it's across the board. In Europe especially, they still have a lot of trust in the media. Switzerland is the same, France is the same. I don't think they can fathom that it would be so compromised.
No,
they think that journalists
thing.
have integrity.
That is the thing. Meanwhile, Bill Gates is out here giving millions and millions of dollars to support them. And at the World Economic Forum, I remember seeing that Reuters and several journalists were actually invited there, not to report on it, but they were actually invited there as special guests to mingle with the CEO of Pfizer and the CEO of whatever, Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, everyone there, you know. It's kind of crazy.
It's just everything now, the entire media landscape and press landscape is Project Mockingbird on steroids. Like the CIA claimed that they had shut it down, that they had shut down the program, and it's actually the opposite. It just exploded until they had a total capture.
Yes, I think a lot of the journalists are, as I saw with the files that came out from on social media. There's a ton of former FBI, former CIA working at Google, working at Twitter, working at social media. And it's for sure happening at the newsrooms as well, for sure. I mean, why wouldn't they do that? Like, it's obvious. And then one thing that actually worries me a bit as well going forward is the whole AI thing. We are going to see AI being used a lot, especially on social media, to push certain narratives. And you know,
deep fakes.
Yeah, and you don't know who you are talking with. You might have a person, it might seem like just a normal person, and it's an AI that you're talking with trying to influence you to think a certain way. I think that's something we're going to see. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I'm terrified about, using, for example, someone could use you or me and our image and our voice and make us say something that we would never say. And then you wouldn't be able to distinguish if it was a deep fake or if it was really us.
Yeah.
I find that absolutely terrifying.
There's one positive thing there, though, is that people can't get cancelled anymore, because people can just say, "Oh, it's just a deep fake, it's just AI." So if there's if anyone has said something bad in the past, they can just say, "Oh, it's just an AI." Yeah. It's a crazy world we are coming into, and something that we have been talking for quite a while here now. Something that you wanted to mention a lot was the whole WHO international health regulations. I don't know that much about this, but I understand that you do. So, what is it? What are they doing? And what's the plan? Can you tell us a bit more?
Yeah, so this wasn't as publicized as the WEF annual meeting in Davos in January, but there have been key meetings going on in Geneva at the WHO headquarters the past 2 weeks. So from February 20th to February 24th, they were meeting. A special review committee were meeting to work on the international health regulations, which were revised in 2005 the last time. And now they're working on a series of amendments. So that's the first track. So the first week, they worked on that. And then last week, from February 27th until Friday, March the 3rd, just now, they were the Intergovernmental Negotiating Body, INB, which is a special body that was created by the WHO, were working on the so-called pandemic treaty. They haven't found a name for it yet, so for the moment it's wait, let me have, it's super long, I have it here,
Yeah.
but it's the WHO Convention, Agreement, or other international instrument on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. So that document is shortened to WHO CA+. That's the working document.
Okay.
And so this was the fourth session of the INB. The INB was created in December 2021. They had 3 sessions throughout 2022, and this was the fourth one. And what they're hoping to achieve is to create this pandemic treaty. I'll just refer to it as the pandemic treaty, or this instrument,
Yeah.
to get member states to sign. Whether it's going to be, I think it's planned for, the signatures are planned for 2024. That being said, so that's the second track. The first track are these international health regulation amendments that would not require any action from the member states who are already signatories to the international health regulations. And so the amendments would effectively become laws, not the word, but effectively would become active without any additional action by the member states. And so what was discussed, it was very interesting because I focused more on listening on the panels of the second track of this new so-called pandemic treaty, but they were talking a lot about the international health regulations during the panel, saying how they needed, both tracks needed to complement each other in order to avoid duplications or repetitions and delays. And so I think, in essence, they are ensuring that whichever way, they will completely erode the sovereignty of states, because in effect, all powers will be given to the WHO to supersede national regulations and laws in the event of a pandemic, or in a more generic term, because they're not saying pandemic, they're having a more broad term so that they could just decide quite arbitrarily on whatever health event it is, but they refer to it as a health emergency of international concern. So they're going to use, in essence, if I had to boil it down, they're going to use one of these health emergencies of international concern as a justification to call a state of emergency, whereby, and Tedros, by the way, or whoever is the general director general of the WHO, they get to call and how would you say, decide what qualifies as a health emergency. And once they call that out, the signatories to the International Health Organization or the Pandemic Accord have no choice but to follow with whatever mandates the WHO decide nations have to follow. So we're talking the mandatory passports, mandatory lockdowns, mandatory vaccinations. I mean, the list is so dystopian. They can decide to place you in centers to monitor your situation. So essentially what we saw in Australia, quarantine camps. But these documents, these instruments basically give the right for the WHO to do that. And national populations will have no word in this.
That sounds extremely scary.
It's extremely scary. And so they were discussing all of this for the past 2 weeks. And it was interesting because they say these are public hearings, especially for the International Intergovernmental Negotiating Body.
Yeah.
They say these are like public hearings. You go on the website and you can click and you can listen to them. But then in the opening session, they say, okay, so certain of these sessions are going to be public and certain won't be public and so won't be streamed. And we know what goes on, you know, behind closed doors. You have backroom deals between the different nations, and they are given incentives to go along with the agenda. And the key word here that I forgot to mention is binding. The idea is to make these rules and regulations binding for the member states. And it's so interesting to see the mechanisms and how it works, because you have these so-called public hearings where every representative of the nation is given, you know, 3 minutes or a minute and a half, I think it was 3 minutes, in order to make comments on, for example, the CA plus document. And they're all calling for clearer language and for it to be more effective and binding, you know, so they're pretending that this is relatively democratic and open and transparent, when in fact, again, this is essentially a PR operation in terms of these hearings that were public, to pretend that this is something that people agree to go along with, when it's not at all the case. This is very much being forced against our will, because we don't even have a say. And who are these people? They're not legitimate. They are illegitimate. We didn't elect these people to make these decisions for us, and they have no compunction in terms of going forward. You know, they have decided that this is what they're going to implement, and we have nothing to say about it.
So basically what you have is a bunch of unelected people sitting there, meeting together, mingling, and deciding what to do with people's lives, deciding that they can just take control and do basically whatever they want. As you said, with this pandemic treaty, they can set up different, you know, as I said, quarantine camps and different rules in case of a health emergency. As I said, that's very worrying. That's not good at all.
No, and there's something important that I'd like to say about everything that was being discussed there and these instruments, is that they are very much focusing on the notion of prevention, because by focusing on that, it gives them like a blanket, unrestricted justification for surveillance. And so that means, you know, monitoring under the guise of monitoring, for example, potential health threats or the virality of different, quote, so-called pandemics. They are going to use this as a justification for mass surveillance on the population. So that was very important.
Do you think that will be used, because we've seen the connections with the World Economic Forum and China? Do you think that the WHO in China, do you think the kind of social credit score system that we are seeing in China, do you think that will be tried to be implemented? It all ties into all of the digital ID, the central bank digital currency, and all of the mass surveillance that you talk about. You think that is something that will come as well in the future? Some kind of social credit score?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think China is the blueprint. I think they tested a few things in China, and this is exactly what they want to roll out. Because they have
a lot of surveillance in China. They have facial recognition cameras everywhere. Yeah. They control everywhere where people go. I remember, I think I saw some videos where people are just, they're paying with their face at the machines, getting sodas. It's kind
at the vending machines. Yeah, it's so creepy. It's really, really creepy. Yeah, no, for sure. They want the same thing here. As I said, the word is blueprint. What's going on in China is a blueprint, but they're in the process of rolling it out as we speak. I mean, you can see it, and as you described, you know, and what's going on in Norway.
And we are getting called crazy conspiracy theorists for warning about these things now, but give it a few years, we'll be right again. Just like we were called conspiracy theories about COVID passports, we were called conspiracy theories about lockdowns. A few months later, turned out we were right.
But the thing is, Peter, I don't understand why. I mean, I understand why, you know, it's part of a warfare, psychological warfare and information warfare. But it's crazy that people don't see that it's complete BS that we're being called conspiracy theorists, because everything we say is out in the open. They're not hiding it.
Yeah.
The documentation and everything is there.
Yeah, no, it's conspiracy theorist is just a term that's been made up to slander people, to try and make someone seem, trying to discredit, discredit one with just name calling. When, what was it called in English? Basically an ad hominem attack.
Yeah, ad hominem. Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically what it comes down to. To try and discredit, because I know that facts are on the side, so just come up with different names, and that's a tried and tested tactic that unfortunately many people still fall for. What do you think? We talked about people waking up and so on. How do you see the future going? Do you think enough people are going to be made aware, are becoming aware of this agenda to be able to make a difference? People will come up and say, no, we don't want this? Or do you think things will just keep going this way, getting worse and worse? People will just accept, because we saw, when it came to the lockdowns, if you had told someone in 2019 that, hey, in a few years, in just a few months, actually, you will be locked inside your house, you will be forced to get a passport to show your papers to be allowed to go to restaurants, you'll be forced to show your papers to travel, and if you have the wrong kind of papers, you won't be allowed to do it at all. You have to wear a face diaper to go anywhere. People would have probably said, "No, you're crazy. This will never happen." That's just a crazy conspiracy theory. But then just a few months later, this actually happened, and people just, oh yes, we just accept this. Yes, very much. Thank you very much. People were scared, and that's something as well. I think they're using people's fears as a way to scare them into compliance. We saw that with the lockdowns, and we're seeing it with the climate change agenda as well. They're using fear to get people to comply with the agenda. And where do you see this going forward? Do you think people are going to be scared so much that they are going to willingly comply and willingly want this future, that they want the Agenda 2030 future, the WEF future? Do you think people will want this, or do you think more people are going to wake up and say, nah, we don't want this? Where do you see it going?
No, you're absolutely right. Fear is incredibly powerful. And one of the things I've been saying as well is that I'm also bracing for another, quote, pandemic. And, they openly talk about it again. There's this this clip of Bill Gates, which went, I think, quite viral circles, at least, where he talks about the next pandemic with a smile on his face. Melinda is sitting next to him, and so who knows what these people. I mean, I call them the Malthusian psycho freaks, because one of the things we haven't mentioned yet is that at the core of all of this is also a depopulation eugenics plan, which is why I refer to them by that name, the Malthusian psycho freaks. And so again, I'm bracing for many different things ahead, because they're not going to go down without a fight. That being said, I do believe that they're going to go down. I'm very optimistic. I have faith. I have faith in God. I have faith in the human spirit. I think we are enough who are awake. We can see their desperation in terms of trying to shut us down. We can smell really that their desperation. So it means that they were doing something right, and they are also not so confident, even though they're just trying to steamroll their plans and like bulldozers over us. So to answer your question, I think it's going to get much worse. I don't want to, as I say, I don't want to sugarcoat it. It is going to get much worse, but we will get on the other side of that tunnel, and there will be light. It's just going to come at a great cost. It's already come at such a great cost. If you look at the level of destruction in terms of independent businesses, in terms of families, in terms of just the psychological damage for generations to come, the consequences have been just catastrophic, and I suspect they're going to get worse because more and more people will lose their agency and their independence. You know, there was this graph I saw the other day in terms of the number of independent businesses that had to close over the past, 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And what the independent businesses, they weren't able to destroy with the lockdowns, they are now destroying with this manufactured energy crisis, with the, again, manufactured war in Ukraine. So they will spare no means to reach their goal, let's put it that way. But I believe they will fail. And the other keyword that I just mentioned is independence. And everything they are doing is to remove any form of independence to the system. They want us hooked to their grid. They want us to be completely dependent on everything, rely on them solely in terms of our food, in terms of our housing, in terms of our energy, in terms of our movement, and that's not how we should live our lives. And God didn't create us to be slaves to a class of people who pretend to be God.
Yeah, no, I think everyone wants to be, at the core, everyone wants to be free.
Yeah.
And this whole agenda that they have is anti-freedom. You see it with everything they do. You see it with how they want to ban, they want to get rid of fossil fuel cars and pushing electric cars. And the plan there isn't to push electric cars. In fact, the plan is that you won't own a car at all, because they don't want you to move too much. They want to have you under control, just like they did in the Soviet Union.
And they can
had
turn
people
off
under
the
control.
car.
Yeah, they can. And they can, who knows, maybe if give it enough time, they can just press a button and they can just drive you to the police station and deliver you to the police station as well. That's probably coming. That's probably coming.
That's another reason why I don't like Elon Musk, aside of his transhumanist stuff. Also, this whole Tesla thing and just EVs and electric vehicles in general are such a scam. And the whole thing about fossil fuels and the scarcity is complete BS. And so he's playing along. So I don't really know. It's surprising to hear him say certain things on Twitter, and he's going against the depopulation narrative. Though it's surprising because certain things he says on Twitter seem to go against the globalist narrative and the globalist agenda, especially when he talks about overpopulation not being a problem, which isn't. And, we've been fed for so many years, 100+ years. We can go again back to Thomas Malthus, we can go back to Charles Darwin, who were pushing this narrative of overpopulation. And so we know that that's an argument they've been using to push so many of their policies, the globalists. But so he seems to be going against that, but I still don't trust him. And I would really encourage listeners to go to James Corbett website, the Corbett Report, and watch his 1-hour video on Elon Musk and his background, because it goes back, to his grandfather, who was the founder of the technocratic movement in Canada. So he has you have to be wary of everyone in war. Let's put it that way.
Yes. Let's go into the jobs before we wrap it up. Just for everyone watching this video on YouTube, the video will end here. I'm not. The rest of the video will only be available on Rumble and on the Substack, because I know this part is something that YouTube is not very happy to talk about. So, just everyone watching YouTube, the video will end right here.